We're here today with Stephanie Ruhle, the fabulous Stephanie Ruhle, talking about a topic close to her heart and close to all of our minds right now. Jeb Bush and his quasi-semi-hemi-demi entrance into the Republican field. Stephanie, you talk to a lot of people on Wall Street every day, all day long, all night long. What are your big Wall Street honcho friends saying about the prospect of a Jeb Bush candidacy?
Listen, it seems like they're very excited about Jeb. Now, New York, Wall Street, obviously you know better than me, it doesn't matter in terms of voting, but in terms of funding dollars, they have deep pockets. And put Jeb Bush up against other possible candidates. Well, go back. They think he's smarter than his brother. Phi Beta Kappa from UT doesn't have the swagger that W did. They prefer that. Christie hasn't yet really articulated how he feels about policy, and he's more of a combative guy. Rand Paul, we know where he sits. They want somebody who's more liberal or more progressive in terms of social issues, and Jeb Bush seems to be that guy. After being governor for 8 years, the guy goes and makes a ton.
Although he's really not. But
comparatively speaking, though, the guy goes and makes... Well, okay, compared to who?
Compared to, he's very, very conservative on a lot of social issues. But anyway, go on, please.
But not if you compare him to Rand Paul. And if you think about what matters to Wall Street, education reform. You can go Dan Loeb, David Tepper, Stan Druckenmiller. Education reform, charter schools, this is what matters to these guys. Yeah. And when they look at what he's done in the state of Florida in terms of education, they're behind it in a really big way.
So how many of those people are going to be behind Jeb Bush?
I think we're going to see most of them. Right now, it's a matter of getting their horses in order. They looked at what Mitt Romney did. Mitt Romney didn't really connect with the public. And what else didn't they like? He didn't defend the industry that he came from. It was Wall Street who had to defend private equity. Mitt never did it.
Right, so I want to ask you a second. So let's put aside the question of education reform for a second because it's obviously really important. But let's go back to Christie. There's no doubt that Jeb Bush is a huge establishment favorite. A year ago, Christie was that establishment favorite before the Bridgegate scandal. People like Ken Langone and a lot of other people on Wall Street were big Christie fans.
Ken still is.
Tried to get him to run in 2012. Have all those people abandoned Christie now? I mean, Christie is quite likely to run. So.
I wouldn't say they've abandoned Christie. Ken Langone has come out and said he still stands behind Chris. Many of them didn't think Jeb was an opportunity. They thought 2 years ago Jeb was saying, I've got personal issues, my family, I'm not going to run. Obviously, Bridgegate was an issue, but when they put Jeb Bush pound to pound against Christie, they think he's, no pun intended, they think he's a more likable, electable guy. Christie, so popular in the Northeast, they need somebody who can win an election.
Right, so you think that when it comes down to it, if Christie's in this race and Jeb Bush is in this race, you think Wall Street breaks decidedly for Jeb Bush, not for Christie in that race in terms of its financial support?
Chris has had a really difficult 2 years, and he hasn't really said where he stands in terms of policies. Look at immigration. Jeb Bush walks the walk, talks the talk. He does speak Spanish. His wife is Mexican. But he has said there is a plan for the 5 to 10 million illegal immigrants. We haven't heard anything from Christie. Wall Street wants definitive answers. And so far, Jeb's the only one who's given them that kind of clarity. All
right, so we had a story in Business Week and on Bloomberg Politics that Josh Green wrote about Jeb Bush's ties to private equity. Private equity, which raised the question of whether or not maybe Jeb Bush would have a Mitt Romney problem, which is to say a vulnerability. I know Wall Street people don't care about that because they think private equity experience is good. But my question is, do they look at the way that Romney handled those questions and say he didn't do a good job handling them, Bush will do better handling those questions?
You just nailed it. They realize private equity is an issue. They realize in the last 6 years, income inequality, the uber 1% is a problem in terms of getting elected. They feel like Mitt Romney failed himself and failed them in terms of not defending the industry. Other private equity guys had to defend it. Mitt never did it. They think Jeb can do a better job because he does have a more well-rounded background, and they think he can connect.
Okay, so here's my question about the education reform thing. There's no doubt education reform is a huge passion of a lot of people in the establishment, certainly a lot of people in the financial establishment. It is also, according to most people who know anything about politics, they recognize this is a problem for Jeb Bush within the Republican electorate. He's got this stance on Common Core. He's done a lot of things on education reform that are, again, really popular with the establishment, not that popular with the Republican base. So the question is, do people in the Republican financial establishment, the Wall Street establishment, they look at that and say, we want Jeb Bush to continue to bang the drum for education reform and run right into the teeth of that problem? Or do they say, well, we think it's good that he stands where he stands, but he should probably downplay those issues because they're going to be a huge problem for him to get the nomination that he needs to get to be the to actually run in a general election.
They're going to say, at least Jeb is acknowledging this. Last week when he spoke at the CEO conference, Wall Street Journal's conference in D.C., he said, in order to make it through a GOP primary, you can't win a general election. They realize that Jeb is saying there's a problem. If you want to get elected by the country, how are you going to get past the GOP? They're not saying there's an answer, but they know that Jeb acknowledges charges
do they want him to champion education reform, or do they want him to kind of downplay it in order to be able to win that nomination?
They want him to get elected. They know that he has the track record, that he really supports what they believe in terms of education reform, and they don't think he's going to make a 180, but they want him to do whatever he needs to do to get elected.
Now, one of the other things that's obviously true is that the person that Jeb Bush or whoever the Republican nominee is going to be is likely to run against is probably going to be Hillary Clinton. She has a lot of friends in private equity. She has a lot of friends on Wall Street, right? So, do you think that there are obviously hardcore Democrats who are in private equity who will support Hillary Clinton? People like Mark Lazar, you've mentioned, we've talked about that before. There are obviously hardcore Republicans in private equity. They'll end up supporting whoever the Republican nominee is. In the middle, the ones who are kind of on the fence, who are independents, and who have been Democrats and Republicans both, who's more appealing to those people on Wall Street, Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush? Again, if you're not a hardcore partisan, where do you think those people end up?
Listen, it's tough to tell at this point because Wall Street guys are not hardcore Republicans. That first election, there were many hedge fund superstars throwing cocktail parties for Obama because it was the cool thing to do. Now, second time around, after they'd all been named Wall Street fat cats, they changed their tune. But if it's a Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton election, it's not that clear. We know that there will be so much money poured into this race, money like we have never seen, but it's unclear where they're going to go at this point. Guys like Barry Sternlicht, you believe are going to go with Jeb Bush. Guys like Mark Lazary, he's best friends with the Clintons. Clearly, he will be in their camp.
Right, and you think there's going to be a big contest between Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush for those centrist Wall Street private equity people. It's hard to say who's going to win that battle.
Hard to say who's going to win that battle. Guess what? A lot of people, they like Bill Clinton. They like hanging with him.
Yeah, maybe the private equity people should get him on the ballot again.
Trust me, I think people would like to.
All right, fantastic. Stephanie Ruhle, thank you so much for giving us all that insight into the Wall Street money bag.